Welcome, everybody, to the August Recess Advocacy trainings. My name is Miriam Sabagi. I'm the National Organizing Director at NIAC, the National Iranian American Council. For folks who are not familiar with NIAC, NIAC Action is dedicated to building power for the Iranian American community and all Americans to advance peace and diplomacy, secure equitable immigration policies, and protect the civil rights of all Americans. I'm going to have John, David, and Zoe introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. I'm John Rainwater. I'm Executive Director of Peace Action. I work out of Oakland, California, but we're also in the DC area and around the country advocating for ceasefire now, as well as working on nuclear disarmament and replacing war with diplomacy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Unmute there. Hi, I'm David Gibson with Peace, Justice, Sustainability Now, the staff coordinator. We're very active in Pennsylvania and also in Florida. I'm also on the national staff of Peace Action.
Hello, everyone. My name is Zoe Januzzi, and I'm the Palestine Activism Program Coordinator at the American Friends Service Committee. We have a weekly call every Friday at noon Eastern that I encourage you to join if you're interested in trainings like these.
Thanks, Zoe. Thanks, everybody. David, John. For folks who just joined us in this training, we're recording this training. So if you are not comfortable having your photo shown or image shown, you can turn off your cameras. So why August recess? What's so different about it and from other times of the year? So August recess is a time when members of Congress are back in their home districts doing town halls, meetings, and hits with local media. And this is a time when you, as constituents, can share concerns and personal stories about why the policy decisions they make back in DC impacts you as constituents. So August recess is different from lobby meetings, constituent level lobby meetings that you participate at perhaps other times of the year, when the lawmakers are mostly in DC and when you're likely meeting with their staffers instead of the lawmakers themselves. Because as constituents, your currency is the power of sharing personal stories, which the lawmakers don't have a chance to hear every day. But you have the power of voting for them or not. And at the end of the day, that's what they care about. And today, and we all know that this is an important election year. So zooming in on why August recess is important now, we're at a crossroads in terms of the ongoing escalation in the Middle East and as well as the U.S. presidential elections. For ceasefire, we have issues, we have concerns about broader regional war, the ongoing slaughter that's happening in Gaza. And in April, we had the escalation specific. I can speak about the Iran perspective. We had an escalation between Iran and Israel. There were exchange of missiles and drones, and most of the missiles in Israel got shot down. But as a result, the House passed 15 Iran-related bills and others related to Gaza, which were all quite hawkish. So it's really important that that lawmakers hear the counter perspective. That means you guys who are pro-peace, anti-war, pro-diplomacy, so that we don't want this escalation and regional war, and that we want to make clear that we need de-escalation, that we need a ceasefire now. And August recess is a key time. Someone can, perhaps some lawmakers could come back to DC and vote, but Congress right now, after 9 months into the conflict, is not nuanced enough. And we may explore having other legislative vehicles as we go, like a resolution for de-escalation, but we need to hold them accountable. And the prospects for diplomacy right now, there's always hope that we can do a takeoff ramp to de-escalate the war in Gaza, return the hostages, and end the slaughter. But we need to keep at it because it sure as hell, the other side, as you all saw the other day, Kufi brought their folks to Congress and they have a pro-war agenda. So we want to make sure that we keep holding our members of Congress accountable, especially when they're back home, when they're paying attention to local town halls, farmers markets, the media hits, the newspapers, because at the end of the day, they really care about you as constituents and the currency that you give them, vote. I want to also touch on the U.S. presidential elections. I know a lot of us, the dynamics have changed, and we have these presidential candidates, and any presidential candidate just in general, they operate in a very political environment, and members of Congress, they help shape your lawmakers, help shape this political environment, and the environment right now is pretty charged. It's pretty toxic, and they shape not only the political environment, but also the media and public thinking in general, including foreign policy. And if every one of these lawmakers are lining up to say strike, then the next president will likely do that. But if we have a contingent of members of Congress calling for de-escalation and diplomacy, that provides more wiggle room for the next president, even the current president, to lean in that direction. Even if it's a small contingent or a bigger contingent, every member of Congress counts. I'm gonna pass it off to John to provide us some legislative updates.
Thanks, Miriam. That was excellent, both in articulating what we're trying to do here, but the real urgency. I mean, it's impossible to say that it's more urgent to end the war in Gaza than it was 4 months or 6 months ago. But at the same time, things just get more and more dire, more and more people dying. The chance of escalation or escalation is happening and can spiral out of control. So these visits are incredibly urgent, and we need to kind of translate that urgency to these members of Congress to do more than they're doing. So I wanted to start with, I'm going to go over the 4 asks that this group agreed on as part of our earlier lobby days. And so we haven't accomplished them entirely, so we're going to keep plugging away, but give an update on each of these. And when it comes to the humanitarian situation, one of the key things that we've been pushing is to restore funding to UNRWA. And finally, after a long time of waiting, I think a lot of people have seen the UNRWA Restoration Act has been is about to be introduced. What's going on right now that you can participate in, if appropriate, is the authors, Andre Carson, Reps Andre Carson, Pramila Jayapal, and Jan Schakowsky, are looking for original co-sponsors. And that's going to take place over the next week or so. And then we expect around about August 6th or 7th or something like that, the bill will be introduced. There are now 39 original co-sponsors. Let's see if I can walk and chew gum and put that in the chat. But probably most of the visits will obviously be after that original, after the bill is introduced. So it gives you a really concrete ask. If they haven't co-sponsored, if they have co-sponsored, ask them to, if they have co-sponsored, thank them and ask them to continue to help out and speak out. If they haven't, you can ask them to co-sponsor. And some of the, in terms of targets, some of the targets, you know, a lot of them have already been original co-sponsors, but you can look at this letter. But really everyone can be asked to co-sponsor this bill. This is something that should be easier for members of Congress to support. There's been an investigation of UNRWA. There's no real evidence to show that UNRWA as a whole is not being impartial. In fact, they found that UNRWA, the UN has found that UNRWA is better than a lot of other agencies at maintaining their neutrality, and as being pointed out in the chat, a lot of nations that had paused funding have now restored funding because these investigations have not turned up any major concerns. It's the UN Relief and Works Agency. It's been around forever to give services to the Palestinian people, not only in Gaza, but elsewhere. So it fits into the regional approach that, or issues that we're talking about. But it really fulfills a quasi-state-like public services fulfillment need, and there's really no other agency that can replace it. And that's why defunding UNRWA is really a way of harming the Palestinian people as a whole, and that's why we need to restore UNRWA funding. One significant thing that we've seen recently with Harris is she has spoken to the famine that's happening in Gaza, and the best way to address that famine is by restoring funding to address it, including to UNRWA. So the most concrete thing we can do to measure what we're doing, how this recess lobby is going, is to get more co-sponsors for this. So that's number one. I'll try to wrap it up quickly because we really want to focus on the visits themselves. Then there's asking everyone to support a ceasefire. You're seeing more and more of that. Again, Harris is being a little more, it's a House bill right now that we're focused on. In terms of a ceasefire, you can look up, you should do research on the people you're speaking to ahead of time. You can look up if they support a ceasefire or not. There's some ceasefire trackers by Working Families Party and others. I can put some of them in the chat. I'm not sure they're entirely up to date, so it'd be good to double check the people that you're meeting with, but definitely ask them to support a ceasefire. Point out that Harris, says she's for a ceasefire, but at the same time, you can point out that the United States needs to use its leverage to gain a ceasefire, and just words in support of a ceasefire aren't enough. So I think that's part of the ceasefire message. And then in terms of an arms embargo, you can ask for an arms embargo. That is the number one piece of leverage the United States has, is weapons. The top line ask can be for an arms embargo, but they should support any efforts to condition weapons to Israel. And I just put a tracker for members of Congress and their positions on conditioning arms transfers in the chat. Miriam talked about the regional conflict, just asking for them to make statements to de-escalate and to not jump on board any hawkish talk about giving Israel all the weapons it needs to defend itself, which is escalatory, and to support Congress asserting its war powers, that President Biden shouldn't continue to engage in bombing in the region of Yemen and elsewhere, and without congressional approval. The bill hasn't been introduced yet, so we don't have a number, but it is the UNRWA Restoration Act, that you can call it that. So maybe I'll just leave it at that so that we have a little time for questions, but we really want to get into the nuts and bolts of the visits with members of Congress.
Thanks, John. That was really comprehensive and excellent. I'm going to only allow 3 questions because we are short on time and want to be respectful of everyone's time, but also we want to get to the training. And so who has a question? I see there are a lot of questions in the chat, but can folks raise their hands if folks want to ask a question? Yes, Vicky.
I just wanted to ask about, I know that there was something going around asking House members to be an original co-sponsor of that UNRWA Restoration Act. So did that come from you all? And is that something that you want us to be working on? Or do you think by the time we actually see them, it's already a done deal on that?
Yeah, I put the ones that have signed on, the very latest, in the
Mhm.
chat. I just resent that again. If you have the relationships with congressional staff that in the next couple days, you can reach out to them and ask them to be original co-sponsors, that'd be great. I do think by the time, I mean, if you're having visits early next week, there may still be time, but after that, the bill may be introduced. But we'll send out to the list updates on how that's going, I think.
Thanks.
All right, second question.
You might have just answered it, but I was ready to send out email for calls to Congress people about the Restoration Act, and when I was doing that, there was only 16 that were co-sponsors. Now you say there's 39. So how do we keep up with this? I don't want. Yeah, is there a website where we can go to see how many people have signed on?
Once it's introduced, it will go up on congress.gov, and you can track the bill, till it gets signed by the president. So that will keep the co-sponsors up to date until it's introduced. The way we get updates is from the sponsors, and we share them out like we just did in the chat as best we can.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marie, for the update in the chat. They met with 7 offices. Congrats, that's amazing. All right, third and final question before we move on to the training.
Hello, this is Bobak. I need very simple, clear directions as to what to request from our local members. Just make it very simple and clear and directive to us. Otherwise, we cannot keep up and even make the right request.
That is a great question, because we're just going to get into that in the training in terms of meeting requests, what to do. So I'm going to pass it to David, and to help answer that question.
And to be clear, we're not going to be talking about messaging so much. My understanding is that'll be sent out to everybody on the list as we go. What we're talking about in this section is sort of do's and don'ts, how to set up a meeting, how to, actually make the meeting happen, and what to do and what not to do once you have a meeting. So we're doing that kind of a training at this set, okay? So long as everybody understands that. So the first part of this is going to be, how we actually set up a meeting, right? So some of you may have done this already. So, and there might be some review here, but bear with me and we'll go over that. So generally, what best way to do that is just to approach, if you know your staff, you can pick up the phone and call them, right? The staff that represent your congressional representatives. But we usually start with an email, and I email the staff directly. I don't use a contact form on the website because that could take forever. So I, reach out to the people I know. But if you don't know anybody, then you start with the contact form. But we can make a resource available for you that you can actually look them up. You can look up the staff for each of your Congress people. Your goal is to set the meeting with the congressperson if you can. If that's not possible, meet with the highest level staff are available. It's actually pretty hard to get the meeting with the congressperson. And oftentimes you're better off with a staff person because they sometimes know more than the congressperson does, and will often fill them in on the details. So don't get discouraged if you're not able to get a meeting with the member directly. Talking this to the staff can be very effective. It's helpful to get a wide range of community members who show political strength to, help a meeting. So rather than just, you and a couple of the members from your group, try and reach out and build a coalition. get other people involved. Think about reaching out to coalition leaders, community leaders, media employees, celebrities, campaign donors. You can find campaign donors on this website, which I will leave in the chat here. Give me a second. So this is a good place to look up campaign donors. Obviously, that would be somebody, if I was a congressional representative, I'd want to listen to. Always important when you set these meetings, praise, find things that you can thank them for, right? What good things can you mention that they've done on our issues? Any key legislation they've supported, letters that they've written or signed on to, even Twitter comments. You know, they made any comments about policies that we can applaud. If you can find something to thank them about, do that. It's, you know, they have egos, stroke them. Specify if anyone from the district is going to be attending the district meeting, if it's a congressional representative. Obviously, if it's a senator, anybody in your state counts. Mention titles for those joining you. So board members, people who are heads of churches, business leaders, universities, labor unions. If you have a group of students, definitely let the offices know that you have students, because it makes it more likely that the member itself themselves will join briefly, you know, because they just love students. It's good PR. If more than two, if you're doing a personal visit, it's sometimes good to get a photo op that way, and that'll attract the member. What you don't want to do when you're setting the meeting is lobby on the issue ahead of time. Don't send them an email about everything you want them to do and, you know, ask for a meeting, because then it's just like, well, we know what you want now, so we don't need the meeting, right? So keep that part vague. And in the end, you know, I like to offer Zoom. I want to try and stay in control of the agenda if it's not an in-person meeting. But in the end, let them decide what kind of technology that they like. Sometimes they don't like to use Zoom for various, you know, security reasons. So if they offer up a Skype call or something like that, you know, don't try and talk them out of it. Do in the end what the office wants you to do as far as technology goes. So that's sort of the basic nuts and bolts in setting up a meeting. I'll take real quick questions on that before I go into, you know, do's and don'ts at the meeting itself. And actually, it'd be helpful, Miriam, if you call on people who have questions, because I can't see all the hands.
Eton, you have your hand raised?
Yes, David, I have a question.
Sure.
What do you do if they don't answer? As is often the case, what is your strategy for following up?
I keep trying. I kind of, I'll give them a day or two because I know they're busy. I'll send a follow-up. A lot of times I'll just send them a ping. You know, it's like, hey, I'm just pinging you on this message. You know, we got constituents who are waiting, and, you know, we want to make sure that we have time to, you know, set up a meeting, you know, when everybody's available. So you kind of add a little pressure here and there. That usually works. So you usually get back to you after the third attempt. Sometimes you have to chase them. There have been cases where we've, you know, just have never gotten a meeting, but, you know, just don't give up. Did that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions about setting meetings?
Yes, hi, this is Lorena. I have a question. Do you have like a specific number, a maximum number of people that we should plan to attend a lobby visit?
This is an excellent question, actually. You know, some of that will depend on the staff and where the meeting is. If it's going to be a Zoom meeting, you don't want like 30 people or 100 people for a meeting. You want to keep it manageable, right? Usually, if it's a Zoom meeting or even an in-person meeting, they usually are going to try and do within 20 minutes to a half hour. I sometimes can get them to do 40 minutes. So you have to make sure that everybody has time to speak. So you have to think of that too. I think a good average number of people at a meeting would be anywhere between 5 and 8, sometimes 10 at the most. Although we have had meetings with senators where we've had 30 people in the room representing different organizations, but only 4 or 5 people have a speaking role. So it's good sometimes to have people just show up and say, I'm a constituent, and then they don't say much after that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, this is Netta from Action Corps. I had my hand up because I was thinking about Etan's question about what to do if people don't respond, like members of Congress for their staff. And one thing we did a while back is we wrote a Twitter thread about Senator Schumer, about like Senator Schumer is feasting and Thanksgiving while people in Yemen are starving. So we sent them the draft and we were saying like, we don't want to post this. We really don't want to get this like smear tweet out, but we've been requesting a meeting for weeks and you guys haven't responded. So please, we really don't want to post this. Can we have a meeting? And immediately we got the meeting. So that might also help a little bit of threatening.
That's a pretty hardcore way to set up a meeting. And there are times when that could be useful. I wouldn't recommend that normally, because as you'll soon hear in the next part of the training, you're doing more than, unless you're working on a single issue, what you're attempting to do here is build a relationship with the congressperson and the staff. So you don't want to burn your bridges. So I would be very cautious about that. There are, like I say, exceptions to that rule, but you're probably going to want to go back and talk to them again. And if you burn that bridge, it'll make it kind of difficult. I'll take 2 more questions, and we have to move on. So Kaswar, did I get your name right?
Kosar. Hi, thank you for taking my question. So I have been basically organizing, not coordinating these meetings in state of Maryland for I think few years, and many of the our legislative staff are familiar with my face and the group that usually accompany me. Is it a good idea to call and invite the same people, or should I always bring new people to the meetings?
Bringing new people to the meetings is always good if you can. You can bring the same people to the meetings if you're not going to be repeating the same stuff, right? So the staff that we work with in congressional offices often recognize this, but the focus might be different, right? But if you can get new people in the meetings, that's always a good thing. Again,
Even if
they don't have to have a speaking role. They just have to show.
Sure. Even if the same people are still willing to attend, I should basically go with the new people. Is that what you're saying?
Well, what I'm saying is it's good to bring new people in, but they don't necessarily have to have a speaking role. It's better if they do, right? If you can bring in new people with new knowledge, that's just going to show that there are more people out there who, have your position or, want the congressperson to do something. So the more the merrier. But, sometimes they're more willing to talk to a core group if they know you.
Okay, thanks.
I'll take one more question. Janet? You're on mute, Janet.
So I was wondering what you do in terms of evaluating the efficacy of meetings. Do you, aside from saying having the person go ahead and co-sponsor a bill you've asked, are there other measures that you use?
So in terms of rating the effectiveness of the meeting, is that what you mean? Well, you set your goals and then, you decide whether or not you've been successful. That really depends on the goals you set. So it might mean, in some cases, can we get a meeting with this person, right? So for example, just off the top of my head, Senator Fetterman, not a likely win on this issue. He's really been very obstinate. Setting the meeting and actually being able to communicate with him, that was the best we could do in his case. Senator Casey, moving him on the issue, and I'm just using this as an example, that's a different level of, I'm spacing on the word, effectiveness. So we're moving him on the issue of humanitarian aid. We're getting places with him on that, but we're not getting places with him on ceasefire. I'm not sure I'm really answering your question.
No, I guess basically I'm just there's so many things that we do, knocking on doors and lobbying and so on, and I rarely see anything, any research or studies that show, are we using our time in the most effective ways? And to have some measure that I can say, I did, 6 lobbies in this month, and here's some of the feedback I got from staff or something. I don't know what else there might be besides actually have them co-sponsor a bill. That, of course, would be a big win.
That would be a great win. And oftentimes, we get that. We started out, I want to remind everybody, we started out with this with 18 co-sponsors on ceasefire, and we're up to 95 now. Right. So one of the things I think that's important when you're entering these meetings is to have realistic expectations. Right. So as John mentioned before, do your research beforehand, kind of get an idea of what you can expect out of a representative, and then set your goals accordingly. If you shoot too high, you're going to go away disappointed, and feeling discouraged. So you have to sort of, it's going to be different for every meeting, setting those goals, and then, sort of assessing how well you did. It's always good to do a debrief, as I'm going to cover in the actual meeting. Doing a debrief at the end of the meeting is good, because you can kind of figure out amongst yourselves what worked and what didn't work, and then keep that relationship going. And I guess at this point, I'm going to stop with taking questions, because we could be here all night, and move on to the second part of the training. So now we're talking about what to do actually at the meeting, do's and don'ts. So as I mentioned, the goal of the meeting is to build a relationship. Now, if you're a single issue and it's just, one issue, you can pressure the representative, and they're either going to do it for you or not, and then it's all over, right? But if you're going to go back to them again and talk about other issues, you want to make sure that you're not burning bridges or cutting off lines of communication. So that's important to remember. Members of the House of Representatives are, actually, I don't want to talk about this part. So some basic do's and don'ts. You always want to remain respectful, right? It's okay and preferred if you show passion. If you're angry about something, that's okay. It's preferable to mention anger, but express it like an adult. Remain respectful even when talking with the member. Don't use curse words. Don't yell at the staff. This will do nothing to help your cause and will likely cut off future opportunities to meet. That's probably pretty obvious. Never threaten. Of course, you want them to feel like there's consequences if they don't represent you, but overt threats are more often not useful, right? So it's like, oh, we're not going to vote for you if you don't vote for this. That's likely to, not be very effective at all. There are exceptions, but, again, we don't want to really talk about those kinds of exceptions, because in this case, it's about moving the needle. Always ask for something specific for them to do. Co-sponsor this bill, co-sign a letter. Never make stuff up. Your credibility is your currency. Never forget this. Once you start making stuff up or giving them bad facts, they're not going to listen to you anymore. Always get back to them with a thank you for the meeting, even if they haven't done much. Thank them for the time, and promise them that you will follow up. You're about building a relationship here. Let's see here. Before the meeting, okay? I always assemble my team and have a pre-meeting before we get started. This is true whether it's in person or in Zoom. Most of this is about staying on message. Good organizers and good organizing requires discipline, right? You don't want to be going off on tangents and losing focus, because that just doesn't help. It's not likely to be effective. The staff won't have patience for that. So get on the same page. Everyone in this team agrees with the goals of the meeting, and make sure your message is the same. Do some in-depth preparation. Make sure you know who's going to say what, who's going to facilitate, who covers what part and what issue. So that should all be decided up before the meeting ever takes place. If you have time, treat your visit like a role play, right? Like a give people roles and rehearse. your pre-meeting should probably not be any longer than a half hour, most, probably shorter, because your meeting is probably going to be, half hour to 40 minutes. Let's see here. If you choose to practice with the group, all right, I'm going to skip that part. Prepare a packet, one-pagers that your organization can leave behind with specific asks. It could include things like polling on your issue, right? What people, what voters think. Key media articles and validators for your issue that you can leave behind for them to look at. Any reporting, one-page summaries or less in these cases. You don't want to give them a whole bunch of stuff that they're going to have to wade through. So it should all be stuff that is easy for them to look over. If they want more in-depth stuff, you can share that later. If it's a virtual meeting, make sure that you have pertinent tabs open ahead of time on your screen, right? You don't want to be looking all around trying to find the information that you need, so have that all set up ahead of time. At the meeting, you want to have a facilitator who briefly lays out what is going to happen, right? How the meeting will go. So respect that the member is not, what is this? Respect for the member is not the same as subservience. So you don't want them to run things. You want to run things. You want to be respectful. You want to be professional, but you want to try and stay in control as much as possible. So when I have set up one of these meetings, I usually let the staff know that I'm going to be acting as the facilitator. I'm going to introduce people. We're going to do a round of introductions, and then each person is going to talk about their specific issue. So I lay that all out in advance. Most staff will understand that, and they'll usually go along with it without much trouble. So the facilitator will start off with something like, thanks for taking the time to meet with us. We also want to thank the senator or representative for voting on X or signing this letter, right? Or making a statement in favor of Y, whatever it might be. As the facilitator, you've already had agreement on this going in, as I mentioned. I'll ask everyone to do a brief introduction, so we kind of covered that. Each speaker will have X number of minutes, right? 5 minutes. So, we'll warn them in the chat when they have a minute left so that people don't go over. Watch the clock. It's best to have a separate timekeeper, somebody different than the facilitator if you can, so that, the facilitator isn't overwhelmed with doing too many things. The facilitator will then say, after all the questions are answered, I will wrap up with a quick summary. So you do the introductions, you go around, you ask the staff to go first with their introduction usually. For a small meeting, introductions can include the participants' presentation at the same time. If it's a bigger meeting, do brief introductions and then have each person cover their part. Always have a note taker. It's important to keep track of what happens at the meeting and any responses you get, whether they're yeses, maybes, or nos. At the wrap up, thank them. You might want to do some questions and answers at the wrap up, and then debrief. It's always important to debrief. They agreed on X. They didn't agree on Y. What's our next step to follow up? Most important, after the meeting, follow up. Do's and don'ts. Dress for success, even if it's a Zoom meeting, impressions matter. Double check how much time the staff member has. Introduce yourself with as many titles as possible, right? Titles impress people. And it also means that you represent other constituents, so that's real important. And watch what they write down too. Pay attention to what they're interested in, because then you kind of know where the sort of focal points can be in future meetings. And that's pretty much most of it. I did want to talk about, well, actually, I'm going to let Zoe talk about this. I wanted to talk about what you do in an in-person meeting in the home district, but I'll leave that for Zoe, and then maybe I can add some of that later. So again, any questions? I see Jean. You're on mute, Jean.
I just wanted to know, since this is their August recess, we've met both in their local office and through Zoom at the Washington, D.C. office. And each time with staff members, it was much more fruitful in D.C. because we had the head of foreign affairs staff person. The local staff person knew nothing. about foreign affairs, but did listen. So
Yeah.
are you recommending that since it's August recess, we focus on our local office?
I'm really glad you brought that up, and I think Zoe's going to speak to this a little bit, but I would, as far as I'm concerned, my experience, when they're home in the home district, if I can get a meeting with them at an event or something like that, I'm going to do that. But I'm not going to use it as a, bird dogging session where I'm going to embarrass them if they're showing up at some event to talk about education. I'm not going to hit them on Gaza. I'm going to see if if we can pull them aside afterwards and talk to them about Gaza. I would much prefer a Zoom meeting with their staff, even when they're in the home district, because I want to talk to the people in DC. Now, Zoe may have a different take on this, but to me, that's really where the rubber hits the road. My experience has been the local staff generally, with exceptions, doesn't usually know much about the issue, and they'll often punt. Ed, you have a question?
Okay, I'm here.
Okay, did you have a question, Ed?
Yeah, just this is new to me. I'm in Arizona, and if you could tell me at least what this meeting Zoom is about. I know NIAC. I've been a member of NIAC for many years, and I'm assuming NIAC is arranging this with you, and to pro-peace campaigning. If you could quickly tell me the basic information about this Zoom meeting, because I'm a little bit confused.
Miriam, you're on.
Hi, Ed, it's me. We're just doing August recess training. So how to meet with your Congress members, your lawmakers, your members of Congress, their staff, on how to have a successful meeting, on issues such as diplomacy, civil rights issues. This is only strictly a training. This is not any other information session, but I can talk to you offline in case you need any more help.
Yeah, I guess this is a big challenge because a lot of the representatives are limited in what they can do. They're risking their jobs when they try to do something good. So NIAC is doing a great job, and there's question of time and efforts, because we are up against a huge, powerful organizations, and the media, of course, is sold out to them, and it's a big challenge. It's a huge challenge. But NIAC is on the right track, and I'm supporting NIAC for many years. And it's going to take time, but if you can get groups together to have one big voice, that would be great, because too many small voices are not going to get anywhere. And individually, there's nothing we can do, and the big powers, they realize that. They know that individuals can't do anything. So at some point, we have to get really the real patriot and loving people to get together, peace-loving people to get together and form a big organization with a big voice, like the African Americans have, and a lot of other organizations that have big voice, and the politicians are afraid of them. So, until we get to that point, it's going to be a big challenge. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Ed. Melissa, you have your hand up?
Yeah, if we have had a chance to meet with staff already and get a second or third meeting, do you have any specific advice about a different direction that those should take, or any just advice about additional meetings?
Well, so this is
just that, and you derive this one, I derive this one, and I.
So, I'm sorry, Melissa. Could you repeat the question? I got a little distracted there by that.
Yeah, when I've had meetings with home and DC staff, and so continuing to, I've heard the advice, if we can meet, bring in new people. But do you have any other advice about content for staff members that we've met with, or offices we've already met with?
Yeah, thanks for putting me back on track here. What I was going to say is that this is the important part about taking notes on their responses, right? So you should have an ongoing agenda prepared. So you meet with them once, you find out what their concerns are, or what their hesitations are, and you go back and that's the next thing you target them on, right? So getting back to my favorite example, Mr. Fetterman, we haven't gotten very far with him, on this issue, but we are establishing a relationship with his staff that enabled us to get a face-to-face meeting, because we see him as possibly a target on other issues, like Yemen, for example, or nuclear arms control, that we might get more mileage out of him from. So we've been feeding information to his staff based on the things that he said, why he won't support a ceasefire, right? So one of the things that he continually brings up is, he's a big friend of Israel. So we've been feeding information to his staff about how this whole thing is hurting Israel in the long run. And as a result of that, we are getting openings on other issues with him. And we're hoping we will get him on humanitarian aid when it comes to the Palestinians, because we're not going to get him on anything else when it comes to Gaza. So we're trying to figure out where the pressure points are and going back based on the information that they give us. So it's important to, listen to what they're saying as well, because it'll give you it'll literally spell out what you do next. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, Mike. Hi, Mike.
Hi there. Yeah, I just had a letter printed that addresses basically what you just spoke to. Ollie, I addressed it through the hostages, because you've got a division in Israel. This is their weak point. You got Ehud Barak, Ehud Omer, a whole bunch of other people, and they know they can't get the hostages back unless they go through with the ceasefire. And I say, as soon as they have the ceasefire, this present government is gone, so he has no motivation to do that. And he's just trying to play people against one another. So I think that's actually a really good way of entering into it. That don't you want the hostages back, Mr. Fetterman? Isn't that your priority? And then why don't you stand with the other Israeli notables who know they cannot get them back until they have the ceasefire? Don't allow the settler fanatics run the show. Are you for the settler fanatics, or are you for people like Omer and Barak who want the hostages back?
It is important to know too, though. You need to know when it's time to fish or cut bait, right? So with Fetterman, we're keeping the relationship open because it's possible we can work him on other issues. But we pretty much don't have an expectation we're going to get much more out of him on Gaza. We've shifted our focus to Casey because, he's a little more open to discussion. And we've already, I met with him at a fundraising event that he was doing on education in the district. And, we pulled him aside and we chatted with him for a little bit. And what he said to me when I said to him, what are you going to do about a ceasefire in Gaza? He said, we're working on a plan, right? Which was kind of a put off. He was just sort of, didn't want to be pinned down. But it's something that I can go back to him later and say, okay, what's your plan? How are you going to get there? Here's our suggestion, what we can do next, right? So again, it's important to follow up on what they say. Listen very carefully to the information they give you that you can use. Does that help? Anybody else? If I have no more questions, then I'm going to punt it to Zoe.
Hello, everyone. Before I start, I'll address the question on local office versus DC office. I think as general advice, I'd say that the local office is most important to be contacting when you have general asks, because you're right, those staff members are not normally as well versed in foreign policy. But the DC staff and the member of Congress do consult local staff in terms of gauging opinion of constituents in state, in district. And so for more specific asks, like co-sponsoring a bill and some of the asks that are part of that John discussed earlier, I'd recommend sticking with the DC staff, who are more likely to be knowledgeable and give good answers in terms of where the member of Congress's positions are or aren't. As a reminder, I'm Zoe Januzzi, I'm the Palestine Activism Program Coordinator with the American Friends Service Committee. We have staff in Gaza and around the world providing humanitarian aid and advocating for peace. And as you've heard from our previous presenters, the August recess presents a great opportunity for increasing meaningful contact with your members of Congress, through lobby visits in district, but it also increases the opportunity for you to interact in other ways. So today I'm going to walk you through a guide on attending town hall meetings that I developed with the Director of Palestine Activism Program, Jennifer Bing, for our Friday weekly action hours. And before I begin, I'd love if you could take a moment to drop one question or concern in the chat that occurs to you when I mention town hall meetings. I'm curious to see what people are and aren't familiar with, what they're eager to learn about. So pause a moment. So first off, a couple of tips on how to find a town hall meeting in your area. All well and good if you know how to attend one effectively, but if you can't find one, you've got a problem. So you can check your members' social media accounts, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. They'll often post details on live events where the member of Congress will be attending. You can also read the press releases, events, and media alerts sections of your member's website. Could folks mute if they're not talking? Thank you. Yeah, so you can check out the press releases, events, and media alerts section of your members' websites. You can find those through a quick Google search. You can also sign up for your members' newsletters, and those will also be giving information about upcoming events. They might also be in local newspapers, so be sure to read your newspapers. And you can also call your members' district office to ask. That's always a simple way, and it also shows that you care about engaging with your member of Congress. So once you've found a town hall you plan to attend, it's important that you feel well prepared. So it can be really hard to get up and speak in front of a crowd, especially a hostile crowd. So go with friends, divide up roles if you can. So you should have at least one person to ask questions and at least one person to record your interaction, which means don't forget to fully charge your phone or camera. It's okay to read from a card or your phone if you need to, but making eye contact and speaking from the heart is often more effective. So keep in mind that your audience is both the candidate that you're speaking to in a town hall meeting and also all the people around you. Because a town hall is like live theater. So you should be aiming to make a lasting impression on the audience and the candidate. You could bring a photo to lift up or something that's a symbol of what you're talking about. You could lift up a water bottle and say, this is not getting to the people in Gaza due to our government's policies. What are you going to do to help my friends and family in Gaza? Then, of course, once you feel prepared, it's time to show up. So arrive early and sit close to the candidate or near the public microphones. If you have enough people in your group, you can spread out across the room. And if you have a really large group and you want to show strength in numbers, you can wear a distinguishing item like t-shirts that have a political message. Jewish Voice for Peace has been really effective at this. It could be hard, but throughout the candidate's presentation, it's good to stare adoringly and smile. Candidates pick up on body language and facial expressions, and they'll intentionally pick folks they think are friendly to their positions, and that's your chance. So it's good to engage before you ask your question. So at this point, you've done all this preparation, and it's time to ask your question, speak truth to power. So you should assume that the candidate has very little background knowledge, although at this point, most members of Congress have made their positions clear. So you can be following that information and be well informed in terms of what they have or haven't said on your issue beforehand. Don't lecture them excessively about history, but do try to convey why the issue is meaningful to you and what you want the candidate to do. So getting them on record saying something like, I'll take a look at the bill and get back to you, gives you an opening to follow up after the town hall, like David was saying earlier. It's important to find out if the questions will be taken live at the microphone or written on cards. So if they're written on cards, you can take a few cards and write questions in different colored pens to make it look like they were written by different people. Increase the chances that a question of yours will be asked. If the questions are being taken live, try and relate your question to the topics that have already been raised. So you could say, like the speaker before me said, I'm concerned about how our tax money is used in Washington, D.C. I'm here because I don't want my taxes spent killing people in Gaza. And it's also important to clap for one another if you are there with friends once questions are posed. This way, the candidate can hear that what you're saying has broad support. Engaging the people around you with a handout so they can learn more about your topic is also important. As I said earlier, your audience is not just the candidate, but also the people in your community who are also attending the town hall with you. That handout could list a future event that you're planning with your group, where people could get more involved with your issue. And then once the town hall's over, you're still not done. If you don't get a chance to ask your question, you can position yourself along the candidate's way out and shake their hand. If you'd like, don't let go of their hand until you've asked your short question. You can walk them to their car holding their hand. If they've got a selfie line, you can join it with a friend filming, so you can get another chance to try and ask your question. And then, as someone asked earlier, it's important to evaluate how you think you did and what you might do differently next time. So you could post your experience on social media. It's important to follow up with the candidate's office after the town hall, whether or not you got the answer you wanted, because as David said, you're building a relationship with them, even if it isn't always a friendly relationship. So hopefully something that I said addressed your question or concern, but if not, I'll be taking Can folks mute? Thank you. So the 10 tips that I've gone over today can be found in our 10 tips for town hall meetings, which is at afsc.org/action hour, which I've just put in the chat. It's part of a series of 12 guides that I produced, including one on telling your story, one on calling your members of Congress, one on writing letters to the editor, and many more. You can find all of those and register for our action hour, which happens again every Friday at noon Eastern, more on that website. And tomorrow we'll be joined by Visualizing Palestine for our call. And then one last thing to note, of course, when members are in district for August recess, you may also run into them in less structured settings, not just at town hall meetings and planned gatherings, but maybe in the grocery store or at the gym. And the first key to making these kind of impromptu meetings happen is being able to recognize your member of Congress. So Google your members and take a look at their picture so that when you run into them on the street, you can stop them. So if you run into your member of Congress, you'll want to be polite and quickly introduce yourself as a constituent, which is important for getting them to continue to listen to you. And then get to your ask right away and be sure to connect your ask to something that matters to your community. You want to toe this delicate balance between giving context and telling a story and being quick so that your member of Congress doesn't want to leave and is actually paying attention to you. And then, of course, though I'm really frustrated with the actions of most of my members of Congress, it can be good to begin with a thank you, as David said earlier, so that your member of Congress is more likely to listen to the rest of your ask. You want them to be in a good mood. And then my last tip is to ask questions of your members of Congress. The interaction's not just important so that they hear what you have to say, but also because you can learn more about their positions. And questions also keep the member in the conversation. It's more rude for them to leave if you've directly asked them a question that they haven't answered. So hopefully those tips were useful for you both on impromptu meetings and town halls. Again, they can be found in the 10 tips for town hall guides, which you can download at the link that I've put in the chat, afsc.org/action hour, along with the other guides that I mentioned. And we've run over a little bit, but I'm going to pass it back to Miriam, who's going to close us up. Thanks all.
Thanks.
Actually,
Go ahead, David.
Just want to let people know I'm putting in the chat a detailed outline for what I was covering. There's some things that I left out because we just didn't have time, but you can all take a look at that. One other thing I'm going to put in the chat for you is the tool we use to look up staff. It's actually a little hat tip to Friends Committee on National Legislation. It's a tool that they have where you can look up your congressional representatives and find out who the staff are that you want to talk to. So that's there. All right, back to Miriam.
Thanks, David. Really helpful. And by the way, we'll be sending everybody the follow-up tools, resources, everything that was shared today, because I know a lot of folks found those resources useful and want to get started and send those meetings requests and want to make sure that you all are well prepared. But Eton, I know you have a plug-in for specifically the Northeast.
Yes, just want to, hi everyone, I'm Itam, I work on NIAC. I'm also captain for our New York chapter. Thank you all so much for joining tonight. Thank you for everyone for speaking and leading this. But I just want to plug that like this work, organizing these meetings is actively ongoing at at NIAC and at tons of organizations trying to take advantage of this. We are actively reaching out to the offices in New York, in Massachusetts. Those are the ones that I'm managing, but we have folks reaching out all over the country. And this is real work. It's really just sending emails, organizing groups, preparing agendas, making sure we're getting on the prep calls, and then executing as best as possible during the meetings. And we've really, it's so encouraging to see so many people on this call and all the energy. But rest assured, the other side, the pro-war side, is doing this exact same work. So thank you all so much for joining us. We have meetings, getting scheduled right now. We just got booked for an in-person meeting with a congressman from Massachusetts, and we're scheduling the rest out right now. So I'll share our sign-up sheet and for meetings, and if you're not looped in, please do reach out. And we're so glad to be doing this work with Peace Action, with AFSC and everyone else. So I really appreciate you all for joining, and just keep an eye out. Please keep an eye out for your email and text for invites and the follow-up for this. This work is ongoing, and it's going to continue.
Thanks, Eton. That's really helpful. Really great way of putting everything that we just discussed today. Like we said, we're going to be sending the follow-up materials to everybody, the resources, meeting request templates, the points that you guys want to hit on. We can also share with you a sample meeting agenda that, and we can help prep you if you have a meeting in the books. This is especially for our NIAC members. We can help help you get prepped, and also do follow-up as well. Either virtually or in person. We got a lot of meetings getting scheduled all over the country, which is exciting. We need to keep at it. We need to keep going and hold our members of Congress accountable and make an impact on the foreign policy especially during the next administration, because a lot is at stake here. We are 4 minutes over time. If any folks have any last questions or thoughts, maybe one more question before we adjourn. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Hello.
We're all in this together. Gonna get there.
I'm sorry. I wanted to. My name is Lala, and I wanted to say